Welcome to the Narrate podcast, where we aim to tell God's story with our lives. We'll be continuing to post the Sunday message each week, but we want to dive a little deeper and offer some content to supplement your life with God, and that's where our Beyond Sunday series comes in. Join Adam and Narrate staff as they provide thoughtful discussions, ideas, and interviews that go beyond the message you'll hear on Sunday.
Hey, so this week we're going to feature a conversation that I got to have with Cameron Sapp. Some of you will know Cameron and his wife Kristen. Kristen is super part-time with Gay in the nursery, which super doesn't mean she has insignificant value. It just means a lot of you will know that she's in the nursery on staff once a month, kind of spelling Gay, who otherwise leads the nursery. Anyway, her and her husband Cameron and their kids have been a part of Narrate for a bit now, and I had the chance to celebrate baptism in a kind of unique way with Cameron this year. So in our efforts to use this Beyond Sunday podcast in part to tell story and allow our community to hear of God's movements in individuals' lives, I sat down and had this really fun conversation with Cameron Sapp. So thanks. So thanks for doing this. I mean, the context of this is, I'm excited. We'll see if it grows legs, if it's successful. But what I'm excited about, kind of what I said from the stage, is I think for so many of us, the most encouraging thing about faith is hearing other people's stories, and or at least part of what makes, maybe a better way to say that is what makes faith most tangible, is hearing how God shows up in people's stories. And I still haven't found a good way to do that on Sunday very effectively. But
sure. So
kind of using those of you who were baptized as kind of the jumping off point for that, but then also your story around baptism this year is different. So So will you just start, like, what was stirring in you that caused you to initially approach me, or what had happened for you that caused you to initially approach me and go like, hey, I think I want to talk about baptism this August?
Sure. So, it had been something I'd actually been thinking about since probably high school. Just because high school, I grew up in the church from a very young age. I can remember my earliest memories going to church. So it's never not been a part of my life necessarily. And but it wasn't until I want to say my junior year of high school that I actually made a conscious decision that all right, I'm going to be a follower of Jesus. And in the back of my mind, I was aware that I was baptized as an infant, and so it just kind of stayed there in the back of my mind, and it never really gained traction. At times in my life, it wasn't a thought even. Other times, it started to prod a little more, and I think, I don't know, I can't say specifically what it was, but I remember you kind of mentioned that the deadline for signing up for baptisms was coming up, and it just was maybe this is the time to talk about it, because I think in my mind there's even a part of me that was a little bit afraid of offending my parents, because they had made that decision to baptize me, and from their perspective it was I remember my mom said, we just wanted to be sure. And so...
Is that sure about what? Do you know what she was referring to there?
I think she was looking at it as, quote, for lack of a better term, fire insurance.
Kind of that Augustinian,
sure,
removal of guilt kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, I think I didn't want to step on my parents' toes in the lens that they viewed that. And I don't fault them for, or, anything for baptizing me as an infant either. That was not... It's nothing I hold against them. It's nothing that was a problem with me either.
And yet, in fairness, it's also not something you practice with your kids, right?
No, we did dedications.
That
was a conscious decision for us, was to make dedications that we would promise to raise them into this faith.
Love that. Yeah. So you approached me about, hey, I think I want to get baptized. What do you remember about what do you remember about that conversation? Because this is part of where I'm excited for this story is it was a unique, and from my perspective, it was a unique conversation.
Right. So in my mind, because this wasn't since I'd already been baptized, it wasn't this like major like, hey, I need to do this in order to like publicly profess and feel like I'm saved. And so when I came to you, I feel like I was kind of open to it. And so when you had mentioned that per your ordination that was not in the cards for you to baptize me anymore, I wasn't offended, certainly, because you gave me an alternative to be baptized by others.
Hannah's really good at it.
Yeah. And it wasn't so much, it wasn't, and I think this kind of ties into how I felt about it. I remember saying to you that I don't feel like I would be less of a Christian if I didn't get baptized today, or this time around. And so I wasn't like, oh yeah, let's go to Hannah, but you were immediately available with what's something else we could consider here, and I was open to that, because I mean it's really meant to be a public confession, and in my eyes, and I think having been baptized already, there's some interpretation to make it something that's meaningful for me and my family.
Yeah, say more about that, because I remember that was a part of the conversation. Just this part of your motivation was this story that you wanted to tell your wife and your kids.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I feel like, there's so many studies out there that say that if the mom leads the kids to church or takes the kids to church every weekend, the percentage that actually continue on and follow is orders of magnitude different than if the dad is involved.
I love the scientist in you coming out. It's awesome. Yeah, okay, yeah.
If the dad is the one also leading the charge with, in a partnership with the mom too, and taking them to church too. And I think, I've got a son now that's approaching young adulthood. I don't want to say teenager. Yeah.
Is he 10?
He's 9.
9, okay.
And he's starting to ask more questions, and I have 2 other kids that are going to be following his footsteps soon too. And so to me it also felt like it was an important proclamation to my own family that, hey, this is a serious part of who I am. This is going to be the lens in which I lead and operate within our family. And it was just as much a statement to them that this is who I am as it was to everyone else in God too.
And do you feel like we accomplished that, or that you accomplished that rather, with Duncan Dine?
I do, and in some ways I feel like in the moment the kids probably like, what is going on?
Sure.
But I also have moments that I can recall in my own life that I didn't understand the magnitude of them until later in life.
Right, yeah.
And I'm hopeful that is something that they can recall. Obviously the youngest is 3, so maybe it might be going over photos together and asking questions then, but
also just to come Holy Spirit, like who knows how God implants that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So, hopefully trying to lead an example for them as well, and get them to ask questions, and it certainly did even spark some after.
Yeah. It leads me to a question that I don't think I've ever thought about before, of just not only what's the value of being baptized, but you think about what we've done 15 Duncan Dines now. I just wonder, what's the value, especially for all of us, of attending that event, even if only to watch, because there is a sense of we all kind of live within this, this is our story, and I'd never thought about before. I think every Duncan Dine there's a percentage of people who were in attendance who are somehow connected to someone getting baptized, and then there's always a chunk of people who are there every year, but I've never before thought about there's probably value in attending this, just not for community reasons, but for spiritual formation, watching baptism happen reasons.
I guess for someone that's attended it also, I think I view it as a celebration in a way too. It's, we're here to support you and your decision, welcome you into this family, and we're here to celebrate this pretty,
right.
And momentous occasion, you know.
Yeah.
You're stepping into something, and you know, I think it's powerful to the people that are being baptized to have that many people, because then they know, you know, like, hey, I'm definitely not doing this alone. You know,
Right.
we talk so much about community at Narrate that I think that's a form of showing up for your community.
For sure. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, it's also just like, I loved reading the narratives and the handouts that they were giving just to see.
Yeah, it was a good ad this year.
And I thought that provided some great context, and it certainly, you know, it's just a great reminder even that God is moving in so many different people's lives, and it's sometimes easy to get so siloed in your own that you can forget that
It's a good word, siloed, yeah.
He's working in other people's too.
Yeah. So you were raised Lutheran. Did you guys do the holy water thing when you came in the door? Was that a practice at your church? No.
No, it wasn't, but there was a baptismal font.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
which is the entrance.
yeah.
Yeah, so to give a little bit of context of how we celebrated then, of just, I mean, as you said, my ordination now, and it's not super legalistic, but I'm definitely living within it, is this, like, if baptism is a sacrament, then baptism is something you do once, and as I feel like we talk a lot about, like, the infant baptism versus dedication, like, that's not an important one for me to win. I can see value in both, but to the extent that someone's been baptized, then we try to honor, like, then that's occurred. And I think probably, so where I've had a lot of fun is in conversations like the one you and I had, and I had a few of them this year, where it was like, okay, the fact that you have this impulse to get ultimately rebaptized is awesome, and I don't want to trivialize that. And at the end of this conversation, if you want Hannah or anybody from the team to baptize you, we can do that, and I'll be there, and I'll pray, and we'll high five. But also, could we sit with this idea that the impulse that you have to get baptized is actually a validation of your baptism? And I think I'm more and more intrigued by this idea that there's an aspect of baptism that emphasizes I'm choosing God, but there's also an aspect of it that steps into the mystery of, and God chooses us. And that's not to say I'm really not a Reformed Calvinist, but
Sure.
I do respect that whether you're a Calvinist or not, you have to respect that God is always the first mover.
Right.
So anyway, the reason I asked that about the holy water thing then was, giving a little bit of context to how we celebrated yours, was in some traditions, there's this water that you dip your hand into as you come into the church, because historically you enter the church through baptism, which is why your church had this baptismal font. I was raised in a church where that was a part of the liturgy, was you walked in and you did the sign of the cross after dipping your hand in this water. What I didn't know is that's the water of the baptismal font, and that what you're doing there is remembering your baptism. So suddenly I'm the one talking too much. So I've had this idea in the back of my head of, like, I have a friend who actually periodically, a part of their Eucharist is he has, or their communion, or whatever you want to call it, taking communion, Lord's table, they have water, and he invites people to remember their baptism as they do that. And so then what we opted to do with you was, like, hey, what if, after first encouraging you, like, go get a tattoo, go do something that marks this, like, feeling that you're having. I say that somewhat in jest. What we just opted on was, like, well, what if we bring you into the water and you dip your hand into the water that we've just baptized from, you cross yourself, and we pray. Yeah,
and I like that, because, I mean, I wasn't opposed to what the other ideas, but they just didn't stick necessarily. Nothing just felt like right.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I respect that. And the other ideas had to do with this, like, I think it's human to want to do something that commemorates this, like, decisive moment in your life. And that's what I sense from you. And that I feel like whenever I talk about this now, some of the people that I have rebaptized feel invalidated, and that's not my goal at all. But also to live within this. I think if we're going to be a community that baptizes infants, then we better have also good strategy for how do we honor that person who becomes an adult and is feeling this. And you would be an example of that.
Well, I think part of the reason I was so open to the conversation that we had too was that I personally took it quite seriously, and so when you said you couldn't, it actually was almost signaling to me that you were taking it seriously.
Interesting.
Because I feel like there are certainly people out there that have been baptized multiple times, and the altar calls have produced a lot of reaction that way, and nothing against that.
Right.
But like from my perspective, it wasn't something to be done over and over and over again. It was really just like I'm stepping into it.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't. I guess that's how I look at it. I looked at it was like this. Mm-hmm. Hey, this is we take this seriously too at Narrate, mm-hmm. and so
yeah, and honoring. I mean, it was just for me. It was so meaningful to honor what you're feeling and your inclination and your desire and that desire to tell that story, and so that was fun. And I'm glad that it was a good memory for you.
Yeah.
Have you had any reflections on that since the fact? And no is perfectly okay. I just didn't want to move on before.
A little bit. John Mark Comer kind of talks about like being a disciple of Jesus is like reorienting your entire life around being a follower of Jesus, like every aspect of it.
Yeah.
And I'd really been staying with that thought a lot leading up to baptism, and it's kind of stuck with me a lot after too. And so I feel like that's been kind of like my takeaway is I'm still just as much of a Christian and follower of Jesus before and after it, but I feel like I'm trying to more embrace that idea of, hey, if I say I follow Jesus, that means I don't just follow him in a couple corners, in a couple arenas. This is a reorientation of my entire life around being his disciple.
Yeah, wow.
And so I feel like that was sort of also a marker of that idea to me. Because I remember I was actually coming back from a project, and I listened to one of his books on the way to Kalispell and back, and I just remember just getting hit with this thought in the parking lot at like 8 o'clock at night when I got parked, and just, it's like, I feel like I fully understand that, so much of the Christianity that I thought I knew was this more easy, your life will become easier.
Yeah. Versus,
hey, when I make this decision to follow Jesus, everything shifts to that now.
Yeah.
And I don't think this past couple of years, I finally feel like I've understood that weight, or started to understand the weight of what that actually means.
Yeah. How do you, like, do you ever feel a weight from the desire that you feel, and the integrity of your intention is so real? And I'm wondering, how do you then navigate that when then you show up in less than your ideal self ways? Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Like, how do you sit with I think one of the things that really haunts a lot of us is like the disappointment of, this is my intention, and crap, this is how I just showed up as a dad or a husband or a friend or a community member.
Well, I feel like two things. Paul's super real when he says, why do I do the things that I don't want to do? and don't do the things that I want to do. I mean, that really validates that experience to me as a Christian, that this is a universal thing, that, hey, we're trying to follow this way of thinking, and we're always going to fall short.
Yeah.
But I heard somebody say once that the mark of a mature Christian is the ability to pick yourself back up after failure and look to Jesus and accept his grace. And that one's been kind of hard for me, because like I'm someone who struggles with guilt and shame in my life, and sometimes I do have a bad day, and it's really easy to just immediately go down this spiral. But I have to remember that is like a rejection of the work of the cross and the power that's available to me when I do that.
That's good. Yeah.
And so I can choose to do that, or I can choose to say, hey God, I messed up today. I accept your grace. I ask for your help. Tomorrow's a new day. Let's start over.
Yeah.
Not as an excuse, but as a path forward, I guess.
Yeah, that line is razor thin between the excuse and just the genuineness of it. And
Right.
I mean, that's really good. I'm convinced that, I think maybe I'm convinced of this because I feel it in myself, that the world is full of people who feel like they did God a favor by quitting on him, than it is people who feel like it's not real. Because to your point of,
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to declare intention and then be confronted by reality.
Mm-hmm.
You've also worked, I mean, maybe we could tell a little bit of the story of, you're also someone, like, you moved here from Billings and knew nobody, and you've worked really hard to form community. Like, your men's group, how long has that been going now, that group of guys that you meet with?
Oh, a year and a half.
Okay, I was thinking, yeah, how many books have you gone through? Do you have any idea?
30?
Yeah. And you guys take the summers off.
We did this time.
So you're really in the second, like, school year.
Mm-hmm.
Is it really just the second? I was thinking it was the third. Okay.
Yeah, just the second.
Yeah. But you've also been the one that's kind of, my sense is, because I remember you came to me and I was like, you can do this, but you'll have to care about it more than anybody else. Because what has that been like? I know you've, not that you've done it alone, but you've worked hard to keep it together. And
Yeah. Well, I guess just to start with the starting in community thing, my wife and I, Kristen, both grew up in Billings, and for the first, 95% of our life we lived there. And so that we were pretty set in our ways of community. And
was that like friendship or family of origin?
Mostly a family of origin,
yeah,
honestly.
Okay.
And so I think I still remember your statement about if your friendship or your circle doesn't extend beyond your family of origin.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Henry Cloud. I think it's,
What is,
if your family of origin is your family of God, then your family of God's unhealthy.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
And not to say that there's any speak negatively of that relationship. It was just that we hadn't really made any concerted effort to branch out of that, and this was an opportunity to do just that. Because I think sometimes where you grow up, it's really easy just to be comfortable, like, this is who I know,
right?
And
we go, it's not an indictment of family. I think it's an addition, not a subtraction.
For sure. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, and we'd never really, I think we were comfortable where we were in that regard, but I think both of us sensed that we wanted and even needed more too. And we tried a couple different churches in Helena, and we reached out to a few people, and they recommended Narrate, and we gave it a shot, and we were both really, really liked it off the bat, and here we are. And it's been difficult.
You still had to go find community, though. It didn't just show up.
Yeah, it was hard, but I knew I wanted it too. And I knew it was important, and I knew that sometimes it's a terrible place to be alone with your successes and your failures, and not have somebody with a similar walk of life that you're going through. Not that you're entirely alone, but it's nice to have someone
it's good to be known.
Yeah, for sure.
So your guys' format, just in case someone was like, because part of it is my bias is it's not rocket science, it's just a lot of work.
Yeah. So,
like, kind of take us through, like, how have you, because you now have a group of 5 guys that meets together every other week.
Yeah.
How'd you do that?
Well, I made some invites and you made some invites, and because you knew some people.
Sure, yeah, that's right. I forgot I helped you network with some guys.
Yeah. And I had a book in mind, so I think that already kind of made it a little easier to get the conversation started rather than, hey, we don't all know each other super well,
right.
Yeah.
It's not that the book's important, but it's good to not small talk.
Yeah. It was a good starting point. And I got a study guide to sort of help prompt some questions,
awesome.
Kind of keep the flow a little easier. And we started that way. And
I'm guessing there was some turnover?
Only one.
Really? Okay, wow.
Yeah.
It's part of why I promote books is, like, then it's not a long-term commitment. If someone wants out, then you can, like, do the next round with dignity, and they can leave, and you can invite somebody else. But only one person.
And
wow.
they moved, so
Wow.
it wasn't. It wasn't like a dropout. It was, yeah. So
wow.
That's what I've been really appreciative of this time, and I feel like the fact that we did successfully get back together over summer also speaks volumes.
Like after the summer was over.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Because I feel like it's really easy to let the ball drop then. And some of that was probably on me because I was gone for work so much. But whatever.
Summer's hard.
I just said, hey, I'm going to be at Brothers on this date.
Wow.
I'm ready. Let's get back together. And
is that where you guys meet now?
no, not every time, but
okay.
we do occasionally.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll just be there, come with some books in mind, and we'll just kind of...
So you just freeform, like vote with your feet, show up or not. Yeah.
And everyone came.
Wow.
So...
nice work.
Yeah, and now it's, maybe we'll do a round robin with the next book pick, but so far we've just kind of been like, everyone come to the table, and we all agree on the book we like, so...
Love it. Yeah, and I hear... just this week I was with one of the guys in that group, and he brought it up, and I know another guy who brought it up, and you're not even all same age and stage. Like you're not even all dads.
Nope.
Yeah, that's awesome. How about you and Kristen? Because I know you guys have worked hard to like create community, have people over for dinner. You have 3 little kids. What does that look like for you? How often are you able to do that?
I think it's kind of intimidating sometimes for people because we have 3 kids, so it's I think it's hard to ask us over.
Right. Yeah.
And so I feel the impetus tends to be more on us, and I've come to, at first it kind of bothered me, but now I'm like, no, we've got 3 kids under 10, and that's a lot to invite into your house sometimes, so
sure,
it's just, instead of waiting around for other people, let's be the ones to do it. And I'll tell you, we've had more people over for dinner here than we ever did in Billings.
Nice work. That's awesome.
And it's been great. And some of it has led to, we've got plans to go hunting with somebody that's not in our book group that I had over for dinner recently. And
wow.
Just kind of...
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been great. Because, it's weird because at my last job, I found... It's almost like... we were living in Billings, a lot of my friends were the people I grew up with and the people I worked with.
Right.
And when we moved here, I was the youngest one in my office, and nobody was a similar age and stage as me, so there was no maybe fewer opportunities for a close friendship or somebody in that walk of life, and nobody was here that I grew up with, so
wow.
It was like, man, I got to start over from scratch here.
And you've done, I remember the conversation. I mean, I have this conversation, I feel like once a week. It's probably more like twice a month with people of like, there's an overabundance of relationship and community opportunity at Narrate, and no one's going to do it for you. And I know sometimes I get criticized like that we should be doing more, and I don't even think it's that we are resistant of doing that. It's just, it's not the same.
I agree, because so at first I was kind of surprised that we A, didn't have a church building, and B, didn't have like regular like church sponsored programmed groups or meetings or studies. I was surprised. But and I think my knee jerk was almost like, well, that stinks. But it was coming from the lens of like Christian culture of I think it was more like this isn't the playbook of how to run a church. And then now when I look at my experience with the groups that I had back then, like I had good community, like decent community, but like knowing that I had to be the one to reach out for it has maybe sparked a little like stronger relationships with people that I might still just be casual relationships when I see them on Wednesdays.
Yeah, no, I mean, that means something to me, and it's not, I mean, in our own defense, like we're going to do organized book groups in January. Like I think we've grown in how we facilitate that, but I just think that we're small enough. I'm helping a group right now. There's a couple that wants to start a small group, and I'm like, man, I can point you to people who we hear about are interested, and but also I think when I think the biggest thing is it takes like someone's got to hold the keys. Right. And I think that's the hardest part about community is But then I take some solace in, like, even Jesus prayed, like, Lord, send leaders.
Yeah.
I mean, so even he was confronted with that need. And I think of this, like, I think of community a little bit like the way I think about calling. I've spent most of my professional life, like, not just resisting, but resenting the idea of, like, pastoral calling. Because I'm like, I'm not more important than you who's an environmental scientist. So I don't like the implied hierarchy of calling.
Sure.
But the older I get, the more I'm transitioning from understanding to respect as it relates to calling. Like, I can't figure out why everybody doesn't want my job, but I've done this long enough now to see that they don't. And we have such a great staff right now, and they all have this, like, compelling sense of calling. I say all that to say, like, I'm starting to wonder if community is the same thing. Like, if it's not a charism of the Holy Spirit a little bit, that, and I don't know what that would be, whether that's hospitality or what, but that, because I don't understand why more people don't have the impulse to create it, because most people have the desire for it.
I think it's less of a calling and more of, a spiritual discipline, as you mentioned it this weekend.
Interesting.
Because I look at how I feel sometimes trying to get the group together. I'm tired. I want to go to bed.
Yeah.
Work was long today. I still have other stuff I need to get done.
Yep.
And it's kind of a muscle.
That's a really good
You gotta
point.
work it.
Like going to the gym.
Yeah, and it eventually gets stronger, and it is like going to the gym, because I didn't want to go on more than one occasion, because I was, nothing against my group, just other distractions or whatever, what have you.
Oh, man.
But it's one of those things, like, just like going to the gym. Every time I go, I'm glad I went.
Yep. I had a really hard 6 o'clock meeting last night. Got done at 7:58, and the last thing I wanted to do was jog over here and meet with the group of guys I meet with. But you're right. Despite and I think we both do Thursday nights. Do you do Thursday still?
Wednesday.
You do Wednesday, yeah. I think there's something to the later in the week the better, because like knowing, like, okay, it's going to be a short night of sleep and blah 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 blah, and yet I'm with you. Like, it proves worth it. Good job. Thanks for creating it.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little, and I don't even know if we got a little bit of time left. You're also an exemplar of someone who's a scientist who's found faith.
Right.
Or held on to faith in your case.
Right.
What were the challenges, and how did you overcome them?
I think a couple things I can think of off the bat is freedom to ask hard questions wasn't always there. And information. Good, reliable information wasn't always there either. So
there were seasons where you were wavering because of those two lacks?
I don't know that I would say I was wavering. I would say I was more afraid to explore.
Oh, I see.
For those two reasons, because it was either, I don't really have permission within the environment that I'm working or living within, and it's kind of, this is an issue that's been shut, and the door's been shut and sealed, and there's no need for you to open it.
Are you talking about, like, within the church the door was shut, or within the sign? Okay.
Yeah.
So what would be an example of some of the, like, don't even consider this?
Just don't question, like, the age of the earth, for example.
Okay. So you were young earth raised.
Yeah.
Probably anti-evolution then.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. And, I have my own thoughts about that now, but I also, I think sometimes I was afraid even too of what I would find.
Yeah.
Because I did have the knowledge, and that's all I'd ever been taught in school. And I was afraid of what happens if I do come to this realization. But I also kind of felt like, because this, like, science is such a big part of my life, and, like, nature and all that, like, this is really not something that I can leave open-ended. I've got to answer this. And I finally kind of have allowed myself to ask those questions and look for more resources, because I feel like I have a better lens to evaluate those resources too, because if you're kind of a young Christian, it kind of feels scary and you don't know what's out there. You could really go down a really weird road, I'm sure.
Yeah, like who you attach to
exactly.
is really important really fast.
Exactly. And so now, as a more mature Christian, maybe I felt more comfortable to ask the harder questions, but I just was like, I need to reconcile this in my life, and I didn't do that until my 30s now, but
Wow.
I feel much more comfortable in my faith now because of it.
So
Because of where I landed.
So throughout your education, because you have a master's, right?
Yeah.
So even in your education, you were able to just kind of compartmentalize the two and
Yep.
kind of la,
Yep.
just rush through it, huh?
Pretty much.
And only in your 30s did you. What were the helpful resources for you?
Well, you, for one, because you were, I feel like you did a really good job of giving me permission to,
Oh, huh, interesting.
like somebody validating my feeling there too, that
That's
something's not always in line with what I've been told or.
Yeah, I remember. I was gonna say, because man, I don't feel like I gave you any information, but I do remember having this conversation of like, yeah, there's permission to go explore this. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Was there a particular book or author or anything that, what were the?
No, not necessarily, because I think I have enough of my own natural history knowledge that I could formulate it through the lens of the Bible.
Wow. So
there's been some websites and some articles and books that have been kind of helpful, some podcasts too, but it's kind of, I have science is such a broad category,
right.
Just like anything, I know a fair bit, there's always more to be known, but I know a decent amount about my little corner of the world, and so sometimes it's hard to find the resources that match my knowledge base. It's hard enough to find that resources in that arena in general, then narrow it down to my knowledge base.
Yeah, I see.
It's yeah.
So for you, it sounds like the important work was the permission to ask those. I guess that's what you said at the beginning, the permission to ask the questions, and that's really interesting.
And just not be told that you're wrong for having those thoughts or feelings. It was
interesting,
or that it was sinful. Or what's the word? But
it just shows how all of us are formed and wired so differently. For you, it wasn't then necessarily the specificity of an answer. It sounds like it was just the lack of constraint to ask whatever question you needed to ask.
It was almost the third option because, before that I'd always been presented with, there's two ways to look at science and religion. There's science as religion, or there's religion as religion.
Yeah.
And, there's plenty of people out there that will willingly say that science is not in conflict with religion, but then they won't. Then it's harder to get someone to expand on that.
Yeah.
That's where it was a tricky thing, I think.
I see. Wow.
So I think that it's the third option for me. It was that, all science is based on all of the natural principles. Everything we have is based on, I still believe that God's a creator, but it's, every natural origin is just an understanding of the mystery of his creation.
Yeah.
If you'd like to learn more about Narrate Church, find us online at narratechurch.org.
You can also look us up on Facebook or Instagram. Thanks for listening.